Good hello friends, my name is Melanie and welcome back to my channel. So as you can tell, the lighting is much better now. I have to say a huge thank you to my best friend Caroline. With my birthday passing, she got me this beautiful ring light that I'm so excited to use. I still have a little bit of learning to do in terms of what looks good and how much light is too much light and just playing around with that. So if you guys have ring lights and you have any tips, please let me know in the comments down below. Any suggestions would be super helpful. But that is not what we are talking about today. Today I'm giving you my second recent reads. So the first book I'm going to go ahead and mention is The Secret Agent by Joseph Conrad. This is a book that I read for my British Literature 2 class, which you guys will get a full video on later, but I actually really enjoyed this. This was for my final project for this class, and essentially we had to do a novel presentation and talk about the novel itself, some background, some of the themes, some of the characters, and just overall our thoughts. And I thought it was literally perfect because that's what I do on my channel, and I aced that project and my professor loved it because I included a bunch of gifts. But The Secret Agent is a story unlike any that I've ever read before. It's set in 1894 after the Greenwich Observatory explosion in England, and essentially you have this idea of communism, you have talking points of ableism and of general racism, as well as England's xenophobia at the time. This observatory explosion ended up happening after Verloc, who is our main character, was known as this absolute mastermind, and he essentially compiled this entire ploy to explode the observatory. However, things don't exactly go his way. I honestly really enjoyed this book, but I enjoyed it for the ending. So this was one of those things where men dominate this novel. There's literally only 2 or 3 women in it, but I think the women are truly what save it. The final scenes, if you have ever read The Secret Agent, are some of the most incredible in terms of this stream of consciousness, in terms of the idea of the avant-garde. And after the events of the explosion, this entire novel kind of takes a turn, and I honestly bumped my rating up for the women in this novel. The men were absolutely useless. Overall, I gave this book a 3.75 star, just about out of 4, but it was generally a 3 for the most part. Once we got to that ending, like I said, it really kind of blew me away, but it was because of Mrs. Verloc and Mrs. Verloc only. Up next, we have Chameleon Skin by Breanne Weber. This is a poetry collection that I received from Whalen Publishing in exchange for an honest review, and this was pretty good. I didn't know what to expect coming into it because I was recommended to request this, and I was pleasantly surprised. As the name implies, there's this theme of overall color. There are some really touching moments as to what identity is and how to blend in with the rest of the world. One of my favorite poems was called I Like This Me. It really made my heart melt. It made me think of all of the growth that I've done. Essentially, it's like, here's this me that exists right now. I like this me. I like this me because of XYZ, and it kind of inspired me to almost think of my own. And I haven't had poetry do that for me in a hot minute, so that was really cool. I did find, however, that one of the strongest poems was on page 84 called The Outlook Bleak. I'm just referring down to my notes because I want to make sure that I hit this right, but it was the most poetic in analysis and explores a little bit more outside of modern poetry. I feel like when we look at contemporary poets, there's a lot of that same pattern, but I feel like this one poem really kind of stood out to me, especially with the amount of, I guess, classical training you can have in poetry when reading throughout the years. Now, I'm not saying by any means that I am like a genius when it comes to poetry. I will enjoy anything that speaks to my heart, but I found that this was the most analytical out of everything. Overall, this is an extremely strong collection. I gave it a 4 star, and it's totally worth the read, so I would definitely check out Breanne Weber and Whalen Publishing. Up next, I have to give a quick mention to my 100th book of the year, which was The Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. If you guys don't know what The Thief is about, it's kind of like your classic YA fantasy, a little bit medieval, a little bit of fun. We have a fun protagonist, and we have a really fun storyline, honestly, that I think is really easy to read through. It's completely predictable, a ton of fun. I have an entire reading vlog for it. I believe it's in this corner. Go ahead and check that out, and you can see all of my full thoughts on there. It really was the perfect book to be my 100th for the year. Up next is You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria. I love this book. I listened to it over audiobook, and it was such a fun experience. We meet our characters Ashton and Jasmine, and they are the new co-stars of a show called Carmen in Charge. Jasmine and Ashton come from very different backgrounds. They're both from Hispanic families, and they've both been acting in very different scopes of those worlds. They're 2 extremely different personalities. However, they find themselves a lot more similar than the world has ever expected. And overall, if you're a fan of Jane the Virgin, I think you will really, really enjoy this novel. So some of my favorite parts about this book really was how the characters naturally came together. I feel like it was one of those things where you don't see workplace romances in the way that this was done, and it's kind of the scope of stuff that I do in PR, and I think it was really cool just to see how these two co-stars really kind of fulfill that story that everybody is hoping for when, you know, co-stars fall in love. I liked seeing how important their families were to them. That was such a huge selling point for me and such a huge part of this novel and why I liked it so much. And I think one of the most exciting parts was getting to see them prep for the scenes and then filming for those exact scenes in the next chapter. I think that Alexis Daria really took you through the flow of this story really well, and it was just overall really well done. I do have to say the, what is it called, the third scene, third act, whatever, the bump in the road that happens, I really didn't love it. It didn't necessarily deter me from how much I enjoyed the book, but it didn't exactly bring me back into it. It did unfortunately bump my rating down to a 4.25 instead of like a 4.5 or a 5, but I did still enjoy it overall. Heavy trigger warnings for PTSD, a stalking incident, self-deprecation, anxiety, and if you're not a fan of smut, this is not a Fade to Black, so just be aware of that. Up next, we have probably one of the most fun books on this list, and that's From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, which is book 1 in the series. If you don't know what this is about, I don't even know how to describe it, but we have our main character, Poppy, and our main love interest slash man called Hawk. I know. And this entire political system that goes behind these ratings of people, and Poppy is very different on this scale as she is the maiden. However, this world is also filled with some really insane fantastical elements. We have vampires, we have these zombie-like vampires, we have it's a whole slew of things, and I don't even know how to begin describing it. It's just a whirlwind. But the political aspects that go into this world were a lot more than I was expecting. I loved all of the different reveals we got, and I actually read a good chunk of this while I wasn't on them, but I was watching Deja's live shows, and I would like type in the chat and her and Justice would like go back and forth, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this. However, you know, it's totally predictable. It's not something that like completely blew my mind away in the fact that it was so new and so this and so that. It really isn't, but it is addicting and it's so much fun. There was one reveal, however, that did me so dirty that I should have seen coming. Like, I really should have, but I was in such shock. I'm gonna go ahead and insert the picture here. Hopefully I still have it. I think I do. But I literally sat there and I was like, why am I so hurt by this? Why am I so hurt? Okay, and I was. Did Deja make fun of me? Yes, she did. On the other hand, I did give this a 4 out of 5 star. I did feel like something was still missing for me. Was it still highly enjoyable? 100%. For this one, the trigger warnings include violence, death, assault, mature content, suicide mention, abuse, animal death, murder, and kidnapping slash abduction. Up next, I read The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, book 1 in the Poppy War series. I buddy read this with one of my best friends on Instagram on BookTube, Amanda, and this was an experience. I listened to this on audio and partially followed along with it physically, and the events that go down in this novel are phenomenal, but also so terrifying. I'm going to leave a link down in the description with a full blog post from Tiffany over at Read by Tiffany. She does a fantastic job of essentially giving you the lowdown on the Poppy War before you read the Poppy War. It is a very historically written novel and inspired by true events, and not only does Tiffany's blog post really kind of deep dive into all of those, it shows you how much work R.F. Kuang really went into this novel, and I adored it. I loved that I didn't love our main character, Breanne. She is such a complicated character with such an intense power complex that it made her a favorite character because of these complexities. Breanne made me want to rip my hair out of my scalp. Like, I was so frustrated with her, but it was because she knew the consequences of her actions and still continued to do them. She's written, obviously, like, like with these like mental breaks in mind. Like she's kind of crazy, but I think that's what makes this novel all the better. We also have a lot of great supporting characters, and I just think this novel is incredible. If you haven't read it, please do. However, do be mindful of the trigger warnings for war, drug use, substance addiction, self-harm, racism, misogyny, genocide, bullying, abandonment, abuse, animal death, animal cruelty, torture, murder of children and adults, rape, mutilation, and human experimentation. I'm not kidding when I say this is an intense book, but it is 100% a favorite from 2020 and definitely a book that everybody needs to read and is so worth the hype. And finally, I'm going to end off this video with a nice sweet ending, and that is the Avatar comics. This one is Katara and the Pirate Silver by Faith Erin Hicks. I solely read this for enjoyment purposes. There was like literally no reason in me reading this. This is kind of a follow along this character's experience, enjoy it. But you don't really have to do much with this storyline. I honestly don't know how much this adds to the Avatar world, but I'm assuming that it's going to help segue into the next saga of comics, but I really enjoyed this. I've given almost all of them like a 4 or above because I just love the Avatar world. I love the Avatar comics. I love how much we can still see so much of the show in all of these comics, and I think these continue to be really well done despite the change in author. So that is it for today's recent reads. I hope you guys enjoyed. This kind of encompassed the last couple of reads of 2020, and I can't wait for number 3 to be full of all of the 2021 books. Let me know some books that you've recently finished. Are there any that have made it to your top list already? Because I know that my first couple of books of 2021, shocker, they're gonna be interesting to say the least. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and until then, I'll catch you soon.